In the splendid city of Agra, where the Mughal Empire thrived under the rule of Emperor Akbar, the royal court stood as a beacon of wisdom and grandeur. On a bright afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the arched windows, casting patterns on the marble floor, the court was abuzz with anticipation. Emperor Akbar, a ruler celebrated for his sharp intellect and love for intellectual contests, sat upon his throne, his eyes gleaming with a playful challenge. His courtiers, gathered in their finest attire, awaited his words, sensing a spectacle was about to unfold. Akbar, with a voice that carried the weight of authority, announced his latest test, one aimed at his most trusted adviser, Birbal, a man whose cleverness had become the stuff of legend. Akbar declared that even Birbal, with all his wit, could not enter the court in a disguise that would fool the emperor's keen eyes. The challenge was bold, for Akbar prided himself on his ability to see through deception. The courtiers murmured, some skeptical, others intrigued, as they turned to Birbal, who stood calmly to the side, his face betraying a confident smile. Birbal, never one to shy away from a challenge, bowed respectfully and accepted, vowing that by the next morning he would walk into the court unrecognized, his disguise so clever that even Akbar would be deceived. The court erupted in whispers, the air thick with excitement, as they pondered whether Birbal could truly outsmart their emperor. As evening fell over Agra, Birbal returned to his modest home, far from the palace's opulence. In the quiet of his study, lit by the soft glow of an oil lamp, he sat deep in thought, his mind racing with ideas. His wife, noticing his preoccupation, approached with concern, asking what new puzzle the emperor had set before him. Birbal, his voice tinged with amusement, explained Akbar's challenge, revealing his plan to craft a disguise so simple it would blend into the everyday life of Agra. He believed that true deception lay not in grand costumes, but in becoming someone ordinary, someone the court would overlook. With care, he gathered a worn cloak, a scruffy beard, and a basket of fresh vegetables, transforming himself into a humble vendor. He practiced a rough, unpolished voice and a stooped walk, ensuring every detail was perfect. The following morning, the streets of Agra bustled with life. Merchants called out their wares, children darted through the crowds, and the aroma of spices filled the air. Among them was Birbal, now a vegetable seller, his cart piled high with carrots, tomatoes, and greens. His turban was faded, his beard uneven, and his hands appeared weathered from toil. Calling out in a gruff tone, he moved through the crowd, blending seamlessly with the city's rhythm. His heart beat with anticipation, but his resolve was firm. As he reached the palace gates, the guards, accustomed to vendors delivering to the kitchens, gave him only a cursory glance before waving him through. To them, he was just another commoner, not the brilliant adviser they knew. Inside the royal court, the atmosphere was charged with expectation. Akbar sat attentively, his gaze sweeping over every visitor, determined to spot Birbal. The courtiers, seated in rows, whispered among themselves, some betting on Akbar's victory, others on Birbal's ingenuity. As the morning wore on, a scruffy vendor entered, pushing a creaking cart and shouting about his fresh produce. The courtiers chuckled, amused by the sight of such a common figure in their grand hall. Akbar, however, leaned forward, his instincts stirred by something familiar in the vendor's demeanour. He summoned the man closer, noting the faint hint of recognition in his voice, though he couldn't yet place it. The vendor, with a boldness that surprised the court, stepped forward and proclaimed that his vegetables were so fine they could rival the wit of Birbal himself. Laughter echoed through the hall, the courtiers delighted by the vendor's audacity. Akbar, his suspicion growing, questioned whether the vendor had seen Birbal that day. With a sly tone, the vendor replied that Birbal was likely hiding, too afraid to face the emperor's challenge. The court roared with amusement, but Akbar's eyes narrowed, sensing a deeper game at play. To test the vendor further, he decided to pose a riddle, one that only a mind as sharp as Birbal's could solve. In a clear, commanding voice, Akbar asked what is seen in the middle of March and April, but never at the beginning or end. The court fell silent, all eyes on the vendor, expecting him to falter under the weight of such a question. Without pause, the vendor answered that it was the letter R, present in the middle of both words, but absent from their start or end. A collective gasp rose from the courtiers, their surprise palpable. Akbar, his face breaking into a slow smile, began to clap, realizing the truth. He declared that only Birbal could answer with such clarity and speed, calling for the vendor to reveal himself. With a flourish, the vendor removed his turban and beard, standing tall as Birbal, his eyes sparkling with triumph. The court erupted in cheers, the sound reverberating through the marble halls as the courtiers marvelled at his cleverness. Akbar, rising from his throne, laughed heartily, admitting that Birbal had outwitted him completely. He praised his advisor's ingenuity, confessing that the simplicity of the disguise had been its brilliance. Birbal, bowing humbly, offered a quiet reflection, stating that true cleverness lies not in outward appearances, but in understanding the essence of things, seeing what others overlook. The tale of Birbal's clever disguise spread beyond the palace, carried by travellers and storytellers across the Mughal Empire. It became a cherished story, one that highlighted the bond between Akbar, the wise emperor, and Birbal, his sharp-witted advisor. In the days that followed, the court often revisited the tale, each retelling adding to its legend. It served as a reminder that intellect and cunning could triumph over even the most vigilant eyes, and that in the game of wits, Birbal was unmatched.